Hello, Mr. Customer. You mentioned, a large portion of your budget is going into the can liners, and you really want to see if you can find some savings there. So I just wanted to walk you through our Gateway Liner packet. So the pinnacle of the liner industry, right? We have performance, sustainability, savings, and ergonomics, and that couldn't be found more within the Gateway Liner program. And the Gateway philosophy is bringing value to a commodity market. Before jumping in, talk about commodities, right? There's really not been any innovation with liners in the past few decades. We just see it as put our trash in it, right? But we, at Gateway through Buckeye, want to manufacture a really strong liner that can actually reduce the amount of plastic used. And of course, with that reduction in material, we can pass on those savings to you. So our philosophy, right? Bringing value to a commodity market. Gateway Liners combines the highest quality of resin, superior processing, and innovative testing methods to achieve industry-leading strength, quality, and consistency, right? So we're ensuring we're manufacturing these liners with the highest quality resins, using that rigorous industry-specific testing, finding a customized program that fits specifically for your can liners and your needs, what you're actually throwing into the garbage. And, finding a sustainable solution, right? We want to reduce the amount of plastic going to the landfills. So jumping into performance, right? Thickness does not always equal strength. The example we really like to use is carbon fiber versus steel. Historically, steel, very strong, it's relied on for construction, it's a very heavy, strong metal, right? But very heavy. Well, carbon fiber rolled around, right? And now we have a lighter material that is actually stronger and outperforms the strength of steel. So again, leveraging that kind of innovation to find a lighter material, a lighter liner, thinner in its gauge, that can actually outperform thicker liners you're currently using. Gateway manufactures stronger, lighter liners for your specific needs. Gateway always uses the highest quality resins in the industry, and we're the only company using R-Spec proprietary formulation. R-Spec, our line of liners, is a 45% higher tensile strength, 33% more puncture resistance, 31% more weight capacity, and 28% more tear resistance. Right, and so, how can we back, what we're stating, right? So, we want to maximize our liner performance. We do that with Liner Performance Index, and we're actually the only company that is actually testing based on the certain key objectives we have here and the certain metrics. So I'm not going to, bombard you with a lot of this information, but just looking at some quick comparisons from the, current 1 mil of the competitor is creating versus even our 0.8 mil, right? So we're getting a thinner gauge of plastic with the R-Spec, but you can see here that we are almost double in tensile strength across the board. We have better puncture resistance, better resistance against burst. We have about 30 pounds more in weight capacity with that thinner liner, less resistance to tears, and looking at the bottom here are the LPI score, that Liner Performance Index. When you look at the competition at the 1 mil liner, they're scoring a 449. We reduced the thickness of that to a 0.8, and we're scoring a 647. Now, jumping down even more to a 0.7, really wanting to get down to a thinner liner, still outperforming at 612 compared to the 449. And a quote here from Ron Torrey at Busch Stadium in St. Louis, since switching to R-Spec liners, we've seen less blowouts, less liquid at the bottom of our waste containers, and we're using less liners per game. We're extremely satisfied with R-Spec. So not only are they using less liners, they're using a thicker gauge, but they also mentioned less liquid at the bottom of their containers. Well, you need cost of labor to clean those out, so it really does add up over time. We have a commitment to quality and consistency. Every part number change gets a complete LPI workup. Every finished case is weighed for accuracy. We want to ensure that you are getting what you paid for. A physical sample of each part number run is kept for a year, and every case is traceable back to the date manufactured, production line, and employee. A lot of our competition, you really only get the size, the length, the width, and the amount that's in the case. Well, we want to give you the exact information that showcase that, say, for God knows why, a liner wasn't performing as well as it usually is that you buy from us. Well, we want to be able to trace it back to the exact time it was manufactured, investigate that, and of course replace it with one that actually should be operating as it should be. Right, and right sizing. LPI has enabled Gateway to focus on application that provides the most value. Right? We want to get you the right size for the liner. And diving into that, right, we talked about R-Spec, we have R-Fit, which R-Fit liners are the lightest, strongest, and greatest solution to significantly reduce the plastic waste that impacts our environment, kind of looking into that sustainability. You know, we actually manufacture these liners to fit specific trash can sizes, all the way, you know, from 7-gallon to 44-gallon. And you can see here the standard, all that overhang. With using the R-Fit, you're actually using 19% less plastic. You don't have to worry about tying knots. Again, time and labor that goes into your employees having to tie all those knots for all those office containers that they're throwing garbage into. The R-Fit fits perfectly around that specific can size. And we talk a lot about sustainability here, and source reduction, right? When looking at, on average, Gateway customers reduce their amount of plastic reaching landfills by 39%. And we look at the hierarchy from the waste management here. Everyone talks about reuse, and recycling, but actually at the top of that, you can see a more preferable method is actually source reduction. In the trash liner industry, the best way to be green is to reduce the overall plastic sent to the landfill. So, by recycling it, it's eventually just going to the landfill. With actually reducing the amount, we can actually ensure that we are sending less plastic to the landfill. Quote here from Waste 360, making less waste and recycling doesn't always go hand in hand. When they don't, recycling should be a way for source reduction. And, some comparisons here. Again, don't want to bombard you with, all of this graph information, but for hard plastic recycling, more than 75% goes to the landfill for containers and packaging. 25%, actually less than 25% of that is recycled. For plastic trash can liner recycling, more than 99% goes to the landfill and less than 1% is recycled. So how much plastic goes to the landfill? According to a 2012 study, over 2 billion pounds of plastic trash bags are disposed in a landfill. For liners alone, more than 99% of them go directly to the landfill, and plastic can take up to 500 years to decompose. So just a simple comparison here, right? Your competitive liners, over the course of a year, 999 million pounds a year of the competitive liners, right? That's at a 1 mil. By reducing that thickness down to the 0.8, you're now looking at 799 million pounds per year. That's a 20% reduction. And by going with the R-Spec, liners down at that 0.7, right, still stronger than the competition at 1 mil. You're now down to 699 million pounds a year. That's a 30% reduction in plastic used in your liners. Right, we also do, other than trash can liners, we do have feminine hygiene receptacle liners. There are bacteria hotspots in public restrooms, right? The most effective way to protect visitors and custodial staff is to minimize contact with the feminine hygiene products that may contain bloodborne pathogens. We have a liner here that is not made from that waxy material, and it actually securely fits onto the receptacle. So when you remove the tab, that becomes your handle. You don't have to worry about fumbling around the edge to peel anything up. It's really safe. You don't have to worry about touching anything. We want to ensure we're securing, we're sanitary, and we're green. So this strong, flexible fit molds around the receptacle, like I said. It has that built-in liner strap that you can easily place around the bottom. 50% less material weight sent to the landfill than those wax bags. So again, going into that sustainability. More cost-effective than the wax paper bags, and they're designed for a variety of different sizes. So, all in all, we want to reduce contamination, minimize bloodborne pathogen risk, needles and sharp precautions. We want to prevent plumbing problems, right? We want to be able to provide these in every female restroom so that they can actually throw that away without throwing those down the toilet, creating more labor for you guys to have to fix. So looking into the savings, we can easily do a whole program, for what you're currently using versus, proposing with the Gateway liners. But, just looking at some plastic reduction information for a customer, they're currently using about 3,306 pounds of plastic going to the landfill. By switching to the Gateway program, they're using about 45% less plastic. and we look at a cost comparison, if you actually switch to Gateway with a thinner gauge liner, that's going to be more performing than what you're currently using. You're going to see about 39% savings. An overall plastic reduction about, like as mentioned, 45, almost 46%. We also think about worker safety, right? So we want to get the right bin for your employees. Oftentimes we see, a shorter, older staff. You might have 44-gallon containers on property, but because they can't lift to a certain capacity or in a comfortable zone, the power zone, they're probably not letting that garbage can fill up to its maximum capacity, which is now wasting plastic because, for every can, they're only filling up 50%, they're changing the liner. It's easier to lift out for them. It's not, it's not as daunting of a task. So we can actually get them, let's say down from a 44 to a 32. You're now reducing more plastic, or the amount of plastic used. And you're now giving a proper power zone for your employees to safely lift that out. We don't want anything lower than the waist or higher than the shoulders when removing that liner from the can. The next step, right? We want to do a Gateway challenge. We want to get in your facility. We want to set a time and date. We want to compare how our liner performance and to showcase how it outperforms what you're currently using, especially with a thinner gauge of liner. And of course, we're going to show you the cost savings, and hopefully your employees will actually see the benefits of switching to that. Like I said, with the higher tensile strength, the puncture resistance, they're not going to be having to double bag anymore. It's going to work out a lot better for them. So I'd love to schedule a time to come in and actually test that in your facility, especially in a high traffic area like the cafeteria, or whether it may be any location. With that being said, that concludes the Gateway Packet.